It was supposed to be the happiest day of Kate's life, a Christmas wedding to a charming billionaire. But what could have gone wrong?
Victor! Please, let's talk about this! Put me down! Put me down!
Victor Blackwood stood at the edge of the balcony, his eyes burning with cold determination, his fists clenched tightly, his jaw set in stone. With a sudden sharp movement, he grabbed the first of many bags lying around the living room and hurled it over the railing. The bag flew into the air, landing with a thud in the snow below.
Get out, Kate. It's over.
Kate, standing in the snow below, was caught off guard. She scrambled frantically, her hands reaching out in a desperate attempt to catch the falling bags. She looked up, her face flushed with a mix of confusion and shock.
What are you doing, Victor? Why?
Without any response, Victor threw another item off the balcony, a leather jacket, landing right beside her. The anger in his eyes was palpable, but so was the pain. He had been alone for 5 years, rejecting all advances because of the genuine love he had for his late wife. A man who was a favourite to many single ladies. Ladies that went extra miles just to get his attention. But only just this year, he resolved to settling with the next woman who would genuinely attract his attention and love. He decided he wouldn't be spending this Christmas alone. But here we are. He had been a fool. There was no hesitation in his actions. Each item thrown was another symbol of the emotional wall he had built. Kate grabbed the next thing that landed near her, clutching it tightly as if it was the only thing left that mattered. She was trembling, but it wasn't just the cold.
You can't do this. You can't just throw everything away like it doesn't matter.
Victor stepped back from the balcony, his breathing hard. He turned away from her, his back to the open door, but his words sliced through the night.
It doesn't matter anymore, Kate.
You never loved me. You just wanted my money. I can see that now.
No, this isn't true. You know I love you. Stop, please, Victor. I didn't deserve this. It's our wedding, for God's sake.
But his actions were swift and final. He threw everything, her clothes, her things, and her dignity, into the night. One by one, the bags and boxes tumbled to the ground, landing in the snow. Kate's heart pounded in her chest as she struggled to gather the scattered pieces of her life. Finally, she stopped. The cold wind whipped at her face, the snow dusting her hair as she stood there, frozen. She looked up at him one last time, the man she had loved, now a stranger.
I gave you everything. I gave Zane everything.
Victor didn't respond, turning away and stepping back into the warmth of the house, leaving her standing in the cold. She looked at the heap of bags and boxes, a symbol of the shattered relationship she had once fought so hard for. He walked away from the window.
He poured a double scotch, but it did little to steady him. As the warmth of the drink hit his throat, his mind wandered. Back to a place it always went when he was at his lowest. Back to the scent of bleach, the sound of a heart failing. The day Sophia left him, with 6-month-old Zane.
The hospital room was freezing. Victor stood at the foot of the bed, staring at the monitors, because looking at Sophia was too much to bear. The steady beep, beep, beep was the only thing keeping him grounded. Sophia, his best friend since they were kids and the love of his life, looked like a porcelain doll that had been dropped. The vibrant, brilliant woman was gone, replaced by someone pale and motionless. He moved to the side of the bed and took her hand. It was ice cold. "Please, Sophia," he whispered, his voice thick. Don't do this. We have the house. We have the empire. We finally have Zane. We still have so much to do. The monitor spiked. Then it slowed. Beep, beep, beep. The silence that followed was a physical weight. It crushed the air out of his chest. The doctors rushed in, but Victor didn't see them. He only saw the flat line. She's gone, Mr. Blackwood. 3 words. That was all it took to turn a billionaire into a ghost. The funeral was a blur. People talked about the Blackwood legacy, but all Victor could think about was the price they had paid for it. The struggle for an heir had nearly destroyed them before the cancer even started. They had money and power, but their house had been a tomb. Sophia had been against surrogacy at first. She was proud. She didn't want another woman carrying Victor's child. But eventually, she broke. Only if it's someone we control, she had insisted. Someone who won't ever try to be more than a vessel. They chose Helen. She was their maid, quiet, efficient, and invisible. She was the perfect choice, because she was nothing to them. Or so they thought. They paid her, signed the contracts, and forced her into the shadows. The day Zane was born was the happiest day of Sophia's life. 6 months later, she was dead. Victor downed the drink in one swallow. He looked at the baby monitor on the counter. Zane wasn't a baby anymore. He was almost 5 years old. A bright, energetic boy who had spent the last year calling Kate Mummy. That was the sting that hurt the most. Victor had spent 5 years honoring Sophia's last wish. No strangers.
No nannies, just family. He had raised Zane almost by himself, balancing board meetings with school runs and bedtime stories. He had been a monk, a hermit, a man who lived only for his son and a memory. Then she appeared. She was supposed to be his fresh start, his reward for 5 years of loneliness. He had finally opened the gates to the fortress, thinking he had found someone genuine. He looked at the empty spot on the wall where his wedding photo used to hang. He had taken it down for Kate. He had invited her into their beds, their home, and his son's heart. And then tonight happened. He didn't think about the sharing formula, or Helen, not yet. All he knew was the betrayal he had just uncovered, the cold, hard proof that she wasn't who she said she was.
If you're still here, thank you. Your presence truly means a lot. Victor's story may be heartbreaking, but one truth remains. No matter how deep the pain, everyone deserves love and a second chance. I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your country in the comments. And at the end of this story, tell me, do you think Victor went too far? Beyond entertainment, these stories carry lessons we can apply to our everyday lives. Don't forget to subscribe for more heart-touching stories. Now, let's unwrap everything and see how it all began.
The kitchen was a battlefield of half-empty bottles and stained burp cloths. Victor stood over the sink, the silence of the mansion pressing against his eardrums like a physical weight. He had kept his word. For months, he had been the only one to touch Zane. He was the CEO of an empire, yet here he was, scrubbing dried formula off a countertop at midnight. Every muscle ached. He only went into the office on Mondays, carrying Zane into boardrooms like a shield, staying just long enough to sign the papers that kept the money flowing. Then he would rush home to be a maid, a cook, and a father. Just us, Sophia, he thought, his eyes drifting to the darkened hallway. No nannies, no strangers. The doorbell broke the stillness. Victor didn't move. He stared at the door, his heart thudding. The bell rang again, sharper this time, persistent. He walked to the door, his steps heavy with a bone-deep fatigue. When he swung it open, the air in the hallway seemed to thicken. Helen. She stood there with a small travel bag, looking exactly like the woman who had been paid several thousands to disappear.
Victor,
She said softly. Her eyes didn't go to him first. They searched the shadows behind him for the child she had carried.
For 9 months.
I just wanted to check on you. I know how hard this is. I'm here if you need to talk.
Victor should have shut the door. He had a contract. He had a payout receipt. But the vulnerability sitting in the pit of his stomach was a traitor. He stepped aside, and without needing an invitation, Helen stepped in. Her movements were too familiar. She walked into his home as if she still had a key.
Where is he?
She asked, her voice dropping to that maternal hush. When she found Zane, the way she touched him, the warmth in her hands, made Victor's skin crawl. It was beautiful, and it was wrong. She was efficient. In minutes, the kitchen was organized. The baby was hushed. The chaos that had been drowning Victor was suddenly gone. For an hour, Victor sat in the shadows, watching her. He felt a terrifying sense of relief. He could breathe again. She's too good with him, his mind whispered. But she isn't Sophia. He watched Helen linger over Zane's crib a second too long. The intimacy in her gaze wasn't that of a maid. It was that of a woman who felt she had a stake in this house. You need to leave, Victor said, his voice cutting through the warmth she had created. Helen froze, her shoulders slumping.
Victor, please. I want to help. For Zane. For you.
No. Victor's expression turned to stone. The relief was gone, replaced by a cold reminder of the agreement he had made with his late wife. You've done enough. You were paid to go. It's time to honour that. He took Zane from her arms, a silent reclamation. He didn't look back as he walked down the hallway, leaving her standing alone in his kitchen. Later that night, Victor stood at his floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the city lights. He had won. He had protected the sanctuary. But the emptiness inside him was louder than ever. He was a man who owned the world, yet he felt like he was disappearing into the shadows of his own life. I have to be strong, he whispered to his own reflection. For Zane. For Sophia. But as he looked at his tired eyes, he realized he didn't even know who he was anymore. He was a fortress, with no one inside to guard.
The silence of the Blackwood Estate in London wasn't peaceful, it was heavy. For years, Victor had managed the crushing weight of Blackwood Inc. while playing both mother and father to Zane. He was bound by a sacred promise to Sophia: no nannies, no strangers. But the reality of raising a toddler alone in a cold, sprawling mansion starting to drain him. The doorbell rang at an hour when no one should have been visiting. Victor opened it to find Helen standing there. She looked nervous, clutching a small gift for Zane.
I'm so sorry for everything, Victor.
She whispered, her eyes brimming with a rehearsed kind of hope.
I just wanted to see him. It's his 3rd birthday. I promise I won't cause trouble.
Victor's instincts screamed at him to shut the door. He had paid her several £1,000s to vanish. Why can't she just go away, he thought. But Zane was sleeping on the sofa, and Victor was drowning in the sheer exhaustion of single fatherhood. He let her in. For a few weeks, Zane was now over 3 years. The help was a godsend. Helen was soft, quiet, and efficient. But then, the atmosphere shifted. The balance tipped from help to intrusion. Victor caught Helen looking at Zane with a possessive intensity that made his blood run cold. Then came the evening changes. She began dressing in silk robes that lingered open just a little too far. She would knock on his study door late at night, asking in a low voice if he needed anything else. She was beautiful, tall and elegant, but to Victor, she was a ghost he couldn't exorcise. The final straw came during a tense dinner when her comfort turned suggestive. "This ends now, Helen," Victor snapped, his voice like a crack of a whip. "I've tried to be kind, but you're crossing lines that don't exist. Get out. If you ever come near my son again, I'll take you to court. It won't be pretty."
Victor? Oh, Victor. Still as arrogant as ever. I once admired you, but it's clear. You're not worth my time.
He watched her leave that night, her face a mask of bitter resentment. He felt a surge of relief, but as he stood in his empty hallway, the crushing weight of his loneliness returned. To keep some sense of normalcy, Victor maintained the one routine Sophia had cherished: Sunday service. It had been 3 years of solo trips to the church, 3 years of grieving in the pews. As Victor and Zane were walking out of the chapel, the crowd humming with post-service chatter, a woman suddenly stepped into their path. She didn't look like the polished, diamond-clad women Victor usually dealt with. She was dressed casually, with an effortless elegance that felt like a breath of fresh air in the stuffy London morning. She didn't look at Victor's expensive watch or his tailored coat. Her eyes went straight to the toddler.
Oh, what a cute little kid,
she said, her smile warm and seemingly genuine.
He's so adorable.
Victor froze, caught off guard by the sudden warmth. Zane, usually shy, actually giggled and waved a small hand at her. The woman looked up at Victor then, her gaze steady.
I just had to tell you, your little boy is just the sweetest. He really warmed my heart today.
Before Victor could find his voice to say more than a simple thank you, she gave Zane one last wave and disappeared into the crowd. She was gone as quickly as she'd appeared. Victor stood there for a long moment, watching the space where she had been. Most people wanted something from him. She just seemed to want to make a child smile. The following Sunday, Victor found himself doing something he hadn't done in
In a long time.
He was looking for someone. He dressed Zane in his best little suit and arrived at the church early. As the service droned on, his eyes kept scanning the rows of wooden pews. He looked for the messy bun, the casual grace, the warm smile. The service ended. The bells rang. The congregation spilled out into the street. She wasn't there. A sharp pang of disappointment hit him, deeper than he expected. He felt a sudden, irrational regret that he had been too shocked to get her name or her number the week before. He drove home in a dark mood, the Ice King persona settling back over him like a shroud. Monday morning was a disaster. Victor was running late for the weekly 9 a.m. meeting at the office, the one day a week he actually stepped into the boardroom. He had Zane strapped into his car seat in the back of the Aston Martin, the toddler babbling about cartoons. He had barely driven a kilometre from his estate when he saw a flash of grey on the pavement. A woman was jogging toward him in a two-piece sweatsuit. Her pace was steady, her expression focused. As the car drew closer, Victor's heart gave a strange thud. It was her, the lady from the church. He didn't think. He slammed on the brakes, the tyres chirping against the asphalt, and threw the car into reverse. "Hey, it's you again!" he called out, rolling down the window. Kate slowed to a stop, breathing heavily, her face flushed from the London chill.
Hi again. Good to see you.
She panted, looking surprised.
What are you doing here?
My place is just down the road, Victor said, a genuine smile breaking through his usual stern mask. He reached his hand out of the window. I realised I didn't catch your name the other day. I'm Victor.
I'm Kate.
she replied, taking his hand. Her grip was firm, a stark contrast to the limp handshakes of the socialites he knew. "What brings a girl from the church pews to my neighborhood?" he asked. She laughed, a light, musical sound.
I actually came down from Scotland for a job that didn't come through. I'm staying at the church chalet for one more day before I head back. The chaplain was kind enough to let me stay.
"Were you in church yesterday?" Victor asked, trying to sound casual.
No!
She laughed again, looking slightly embarrassed.
I had cramps. Couldn't move.
Victor felt a wave of relief so strong it almost embarrassed him. She was just human. He looked at Zane, who was currently trying to reach out to her from his seat.
Aw, he really is a charmer,
Kate said, leaning in to look at the boy.
You're lucky, Victor.
Victor looked at her, then at his son, then back at her. He knew he was running late for his Monday meeting. He didn't care. "Can we meet for a drink this evening? Or perhaps dinner?" he asked, his voice uncharacteristically hopeful. Kate hesitated, biting her lip.
On one condition.
"Anything," Victor said. She reached in and touched Zane's cheek.
Would this charmer hang out with us? I'd love to see more of this cute little smile.
Victor felt a lump in his throat. Most women saw Zane as an obstacle to his wealth. Kate saw him as the guest of honor. "Of course," Victor laughed. "He's always hanging out with me." They quickly exchanged numbers, and, as Victor drove off toward the city, he caught her waving in his rearview mirror. The grey London sky didn't look so heavy anymore. For the first time in long years, he was genuinely smiling. The gastropub in Chelsea was a world away from the sterile, high-end boardrooms of the city. It was thick with the scent of roasted malt and rosemary, a low hum of conversation acting as a buffer against the biting London mist outside. Victor sat in a corner booth, his fingers drummed a restless rhythm on the dark wood. He was dressed down, a charcoal cashmere sweater that cost more than most people's rent, but his posture remained that of a man holding a fortress. On the high chair beside him, Zane was happily battling a plastic dinosaur against a salt shaker. Then the door swung open, and the Ice King felt a fissure in his armor. Kate walked in, her cheeks flushed from the cold. She wasn't dressed to impress a billionaire. She wore a simple cream turtleneck and a wool coat that looked lived in. When her eyes found them, she didn't look at Victor first. She looked at the boy.
The charmer made it.
She laughed, her voice cutting through Victor's tension like a warm blade. She didn't wait for a formal greeting. She walked straight to Zane and booped his nose.
And he brought a T-Rex. Good choice.
As the meal progressed, Victor found himself doing something he hadn't done in years. He breathed. He watched Kate interact with Zane, her laughter genuine and unhurried. She wasn't performing, she seemed to simply exist in the moment. Finally, while Zane was occupied with a bowl of chips, Kate leaned in. She rested her chin on her hand, her gaze lingering on the shadows of exhaustion beneath Victor's eyes. "So," she started, her tone playful but curious.
I've been watching you navigate a toddler, a ringing work phone, and a dinner menu without breaking a sweat. You're like a one-man army, Victor.
She paused, her expression shifting to something softer, more hesitant.
But I have to ask, where is his mother? Is she at home, waiting for a full report on how the chips were?
The table went silent. The clatter of the pub seemed to fade into a dull roar. Victor's hand tightened around his glass. It was a question he usually parried with a cold, professional wall, but looking into Kate's wide, amber eyes, the wall felt thin, brittle. "She passed away," Victor said, the words heavy and familiar. "Almost 4 years ago, just after he was born." Kate didn't offer a shallow, practiced apology. She didn't look away. Instead, she went completely still, a flash of believable pain crossing her face, as if she were feeling the weight of his words herself. Kate was irresistibly beautiful, her allure far surpassing that of Sophia, Victor's late wife. But Victor knew beauty wasn't enough. He needed to see beyond it, what makes her different from the rest. Kate was a skilled actress, so convincing, so believable. But was she hiding something darker?
Oh, Victor.
She whispered. She reached across the table, her fingers grazing the back of his hand for just a heartbeat before she pulled back.
Oh my gosh. I had no idea. You've been doing all of this by yourself? You seem like a man who has a whole table filled with responsibility, an empire, maybe. Yet you're doing the laundry and the bedtime stories alone.
She exhaled a long, shaky breath.
It's a lot for one heart to carry, Victor. Truly. You're so busy being a hero for him. I wonder if you ever get to be just a man.
Victor felt a lump in his throat he couldn't swallow. No one had ever seen the man behind the Titan. Not like this. She was a genius indeed. In that moment of raw vulnerability, Zane's dinosaur took a dive, and his arm swept across the table. A large glass of orange juice tipped, the sticky liquid rushing across the wood toward Victor's bespoke trousers. Victor flinched. His Ice King temper flared, not at his son, but at the sheer, overwhelming chaos that was his life. He felt the familiar spark of stress, the feeling of losing control in a world that demanded perfection.
It's just juice, Victor. Breathe, Victor,
Kate said smoothly. Before he could even react, she was already dabbing the spill with a handful of napkins, her movements calm and rhythmic. She didn't look annoyed. She looked amused. She caught Zane's eye and made a funny, puffed-out face.
The table needed a wash anyway, didn't it, Zane?
Zane, who had been bracing for his father's frustration, let out a delighted, bubbly giggle. Victor watched her, and in that moment, the trap was sealed. Sophia had been brilliant and loyal, but she had been rigid. Everything had to be perfect. Kate made the mess okay. She made the world feel safe. The night ended with a chaste kiss on the cheek outside the church chalet. Victor drove away in his Aston Martin, feeling like he was finally waking up from a 4-year sleep. But as the taillights disappeared into the London fog, the warm Kate vanished. She walked around the side of the stone chapel, her face hardening into a mask of cold focus. Helen was waiting there, huddled in a dark coat, her eyes hungry for news.
Well,
Helen hissed.
did he buy it?
He bought it.
Kate said, her voice flat, devoid of the melody she had used at dinner.
I asked about the mother. He's exactly where you said he'd be, Helen. Exhausted, lonely, and practically begging for someone to save him. Good.
Helen whispered, stepping into Kate's space.
Don't forget the plan, Kate. Work your way in. You like him, I know. Once you're in, we activate the bigger plan. You get the life, I get my pound of flesh. The 9 months of hell I spent carrying that child.
Kate looked down at her hands, which still felt the phantom warmth of Victor's skin. For a split second, a flash of genuine guilt crossed her face.
He's a good man, Helen. And the boy, he's innocent.
Just the boy, he's mine. None of them is innocent. They think money is enough to buy life.
Helen laughed, a jagged sound in the night air.
Do your job, Kate, or I'll tell him exactly who you are before you can even cough. We'll both lose.
The morning had been a disaster. Victor stood in the center of the kitchen, his tie undone and hanging around his neck like a noose. He watched Zane have a full-blown meltdown over a piece of burnt toast, the boy's screams echoing off the cold marble walls of the Blackwood Estate. The silence Victor usually curated, the controlled, quiet grief he called a life, had been shattered. Zane, please. Daddy has a merger call in 20 minutes, Victor pleaded, his voice sounding hollow even to his own ears. He reached for his phone to alert his assistant, but his thumb froze over a new notification. Kate, 10:15 a.m. I'm at the station. My time at the church chalet is up. I just wanted to say goodbye to the charmer one last time. It was lovely meeting you, Victor. Kate! She already had Victor's remote control, and the battery was 99%. The screaming in the kitchen seemed to fade into a dull hum. Victor felt a cold, jagged spike of panic. The church was barely a kilometre away. He'd seen her jogging those streets just days ago. She was right there, yet she was slipping away. It wasn't just about a woman. It was about the only person who had made the screaming stop. Victor looked at Zane, who was now sobbing quietly on the floor, exhausted by his own frustration. Zane, Victor whispered, kneeling on the tiles. Do you want to go see Kate? Before she goes on a big train? The boy's head snapped up, his tear-streaked face suddenly hopeful.
Kate! See Kate now?
Now. Victor didn't grab his briefcase. He grabbed Zane's coat and bolted for the garage. He drove the short distance to the North London church with a reckless speed, the tyres of the Aston Martin crunching loudly on the gravel lot of the chalet. He saw her immediately. She was hoisting her single battered suitcase onto her shoulder, looking smaller than she had in the pub.
Victor.
She turned as he killed the engine, her expression a mix of shock and heartbreak.
What are you doing here? I'm literally minutes from the station.
Zane didn't give her a chance to explain. He scrambled out of the car, his little legs moving as fast as they could.
No train! No train, Kate!
He collided with her knees, clinging to her sweater like a life raft. Kate's face crumbled. She dropped to the gravel, pulling the boy into a fierce hug.
Oh, sweetie. I have to. I have to find work. I can't stay in London on a dream.
Victor stood over them, the biting wind whipping his coat. He looked at his son clinging to a stranger, and then at the woman who looked like the only home they had left.
Stay, Victor said. It wasn't a request. It was a command from a man who refused to lose.
Victor, be realistic,
Kate said, her voice trembling as she looked up from the gravel.
I have no money, no flat, and no reason to be here.
I'm opening a foundation, Victor blurted out. The lie was born right there, in the shadow of the stone chapel. A childhood development centre, in Sophia's name. I realised I've been hoarding my resources. I need a director, someone with heart. I'll pay you triple what any job in Scotland would offer. Kate blinked, her hands still resting on Zane's shoulders.
A foundation? In Sophia's name?
It's in the early stages, but the funding is already there, Victor pushed, his voice gaining that frantic, persuasive edge he used to close billion-pound deals. I need you, Kate. Zane needs you. Don't go back to waiting tables. Help me build this. Zane pulled back, looking at Kate with wide, watery eyes.
Stay, Kate, please.
The silence that followed was heavy. Kate looked at the boy, then up at Victor, letting out a long, shaky breath that looked like a surrender.
For the foundation.
She whispered.
And for the dinosaurs.
20 minutes later, the iron gates of the Blackwood Estate swung open. Victor carried her suitcase into the East Wing himself, a suite of rooms that had been a tomb for 5 years. Zane was already running ahead, showing Kate the big windows that looked out over the London skyline. I'll let you two settle in, Victor said, standing in the doorway. He felt an immense, staggering sense of relief. He had won. Once the door clicked shut, the atmosphere shifted. Zane was jumping on the massive plush bed, his laughter filling the room. But Kate walked slowly to the full-length gold-leaf mirror. She looked at the luxury. She looked at the boy. Victor was downstairs, probably already calling his lawyers to scramble and actually create a foundation out of thin air just to justify her presence. He was building a kingdom out of a desperate lie. Kate sat on the edge of the bed, watching Zane's eyes finally begin to flutter shut. She reached out and smoothed his hair, her expression turning from warm to icy as she looked toward the door. She was inside the fortress. The Ice King had opened the gates, and the prince was in her lap. Now, the real work began. Victor is living a lie he created to keep her. Kate is living a lie she was sent to tell. But was Kate still living the lie, though, or something had shifted?
The first week of Kate living in the East Wing was a masterclass in quiet infiltration. Victor had spent a fortune to make his lie look like a legacy. He had Buck set up a satellite office in the library, complete with a high-end laptop and foundation folders. He was so desperate to anchor Kate to the house that he was building a multi-million-pound entity just to justify why she was there. In this house, the walls didn't have ears. After Helen, the maid Victor had trusted with his home and his son, was sacked, he had cleared the board. No internal staff, no prying eyes. Only high-end external security and a couple of cleaning staff. Victor handled his own private wing himself. Until Kate. Victor sat across from her in the library, the late afternoon sun casting long, golden bars across the floor. He pushed a leather-bound folder toward her. "This is the initial grant structure," he said, his voice dropping into that low, intimate register. "I've put your name on the signature cards. I want you to have total autonomy, Kate. If you see a child who needs what the state can't provide, you make the call." Kate looked at the folder.
Victor, you're handing me the keys to a kingdom.
"I know how you look at my son," Victor countered, his gaze intense. "I'm a man of instincts. My instincts say you are the only real thing in this city." Kate didn't use the signature cards. She didn't look for a payout. Instead, she focused entirely on the boy while Victor watched from the shadows of his own home. She learned the exact way Zane liked his crusts cut. She learned the specific night-night song Victor usually struggled to hum. One evening, Victor stood in the doorway of the nursery, watching Kate rock Zane to sleep. The house was quiet. No tantrums, no screaming. Kate woke up as he approached, offering a sleepy, innocent smile.
Oh, Victor. Sorry. He wouldn't let go of my hand. I didn't want to wake him.
"Don't apologize," Victor whispered, stepping into the room. He felt a wave of gratitude so strong it was almost painful. He hasn't slept like this since before Helen. Kate kept her expression soft, her voice a curious whisper.
Helen? You mentioned her before. Was she close to him?
Victor's face hardened. She was a mistake. Someone I trusted to care for this house, but she didn't know her place. She tried to interfere in things that didn't concern her. I had her removed and erased from our lives. Kate's mind shifted as regret began to cloud her thoughts. She had conspired with her cousin Helen to seduce Victor, using Zane as a pawn in their game. Caring for Zane, she knew, was the ultimate key to getting closer to Victor. But as days passed, Kate found herself tangled in a web of her own emotions. She had fallen for the boy, not just for his wealth, but for his quiet strength, his vulnerability she hadn't expected. Kate's heart began to race with the realization she wasn't just infatuated with Zane. Victor had become a constant thought in her mind, someone whose presence ignited something she hadn't anticipated. She saw through the arrogant exterior that the world saw. A man who was used to commanding respect,
a man who kept his emotions behind walls of cold indifference.
Yet when their eyes met, there was something more beneath the surface.
A softness, a hidden tenderness he guarded carefully, like a secret he didn't know how to share. Victor was a paradox. He was strong-willed, yet vulnerable. His sharp features, his intense gaze, seemed to hide a lifetime of pain and loss, things he carried silently, not for anyone to see. He had walls, yes, but Kate was beginning to sense the cracks. She could see it in his eyes when no one was watching, a flicker of something real. Victor was a man who had everything, and yet, in those fleeting moments when his guard dropped, Kate could see he was still searching for something he hadn't found. It was this complexity that drew her in, this challenge to reach him, to break through, and to prove that he could be loved for more than just his power. The more she cared for Zane, the more she found herself caring for Victor. And now, as Kate sat there, trying to piece together her emotions, she was no longer sure if her feelings were part of the plan, or if, for the first time in her life, she was genuinely falling for a real man.
I can't imagine anyone wanting to hurt this family,
Kate said, her hands stroking Zane's hair. They don't get a second chance, Victor said simply. As the days passed, Victor found himself going out more, finding comfort in the care and attention given to his son by Kate. When he is at home, he is working from the study just to be near the family he had manufactured. He watched Kate in the garden with Zane. He watched her working on the foundation files. Every time she handled a mess or settled a cry, he felt the trap tightening, not around her, but around him. He was becoming addicted to her presence. Kate, watching him from the corner of her eye, knew exactly what she was doing. She wasn't just a guest, she was becoming the air he breathed. She reached into her pocket, her fingers brushing the phone. She needed to know what Helen had interfered with, because the more Victor trusted her, the more she realized that if he ever found out she was Helen's weapon, the Ice King wouldn't just sack her, he would destroy her. Second week in the Blackwood Estate felt like the shifting of a season. The Sophia Blackwood Foundation had become a quiet hum of activity in the library, providing the perfect cover for Kate to be exactly where Victor needed her, at the heart of his home. One afternoon, the pretense of work finally slipped. Victor found Kate sitting on the floor of the library, surrounded by the folders he'd provided. She wasn't looking at spreadsheets. She was looking at a drawing Zane had made of a family that featured 3 stick figures. Victor sat on the edge of the mahogany desk, watching her. "He's never put a third person in those drawings before," he said. "Usually it's just him and me, or him and a dinosaur." Kate looked up, her expression a mix of warmth and a guilt she had to work hard to hide.
He has a big heart, Victor. He just needed someone to show him it was okay to use it.
Victor looked away, his jaw tightening. "I thought I was doing enough. I thought if I kept the world out, I could keep him safe. But watching him with you, I realized I was just keeping him lonely."
You were protecting him, Victor. That's what a father does. You don't have to apologize for loving him too much.
Kate didn't push. She didn't ask for more access or more money. She simply leaned her head against the side of the desk, close to his knee. Victor reached down, his fingers hesitating, before they brushed a stray lock of hair from her face. It was the first time he had initiated a touch that wasn't accidental. It was a gesture of profound, burgeoning trust. "I'm not sure I remember how to do this," he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. "Opening the gates. I'm so used to the fortress." That evening, there was no talk of business or foundations. Victor stayed home for dinner, and for the first time, they ate in the small breakfast nook rather than the cavernous dining hall. Zane fell asleep with his head in Kate's lap, while Victor told a story about his own childhood. A rare glimpse into the man before the Ice King title. He spoke of his parents, of the pressure of the Blackwood name, and of the terrifying moment he realized he was responsible for a tiny life. He was being completely, devastatingly honest. Kate listened, her thumb tracing the line of Zane's jaw. Every sincere word Victor spoke felt like a heavy stone being placed on her chest. She had come here to play a man who had too much, but she was finding a man who had given everything to a son who was his entire world. When it was time to move Zane to bed, Victor didn't call for help. He lifted the boy, but as he did, he looked at Kate with a look of such raw clarity it made her breath catch. "I used to think the silence in this house was peace," Victor said. "I was wrong. It was just empty." He stood there for a moment, the boy in his arms, the woman he trusted at his side. The starting point was visible now, the moment where the employer-employee boundary was about to dissolve forever. He wasn't looking at a director of a foundation. He was looking at the woman he wanted to keep in the East Wing for the rest of his life. Kate watched him walk away, her heart thundering. She reached into her pocket and felt the cold plastic of the phone. For the first time, the plan felt like a burden she couldn't carry. Victor wasn't a villain to be toppled. He was a man who had finally opened his gates, and she was the one holding the torch. 6 months down the line, Victor was no longer looking at Kate as a temporary fix for his son's grief. He was looking at her as the permanent solution to his own. But Kate knew that as long as Helen had a way into the estate, the foundation she was building was made of glass. 2 days prior, Kate had met Helen in a secluded, wind-swept corner of Regent's Park. Helen looked frayed, her eyes bright with a sharp, hungry desperation.
"You're drifting, Kate."
Helen had hissed, her voice cutting through the cold.
"I see you in the house. I see you getting comfortable. Stay on track. Keep your eye on the goal."
I am on track.
Kate replied, her voice low.
But Victor isn't a man you can rush.
"Don't get fond of the boy."
Helen warned.
"I didn't pluck you out of that dust to give you a fairy tale. Get a legal commitment. Secure your place. If you don't, I'll find my own way back into that house, and I won't care if I burn you down with it."
It was that threat, the realization that Helen was becoming a loose cannon, that prompted Kate's move. She needed Helen not just away from the house, but legally and physically barred by Victor's own hand. The twilight was thick and grey over North London. Victor was in the library, reviewing foundation documents, while Kate sat on the rug with Zane. The scene was perfectly domestic, until Kate chose to shatter it. She stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows, her breath hitching audibly. She didn't scream. She let out a sharp, stifled gasp and recoiled, her body hitting the bookshelf. She grabbed Zane, pulling him into her lap with a frantic, protective urgency.
Victor, someone is out there,
she whispered, her voice thick with terror.
by the stone fountain. They were looking right at us. A woman. She moved so fast, like she knew exactly where the cameras couldn't see.
Victor was on his feet in a second. He scanned the darkened lawn. The perimeter sensors are quiet, Kate. It might have been the wind.
It wasn't the wind. She had a key, Victor. I saw the flash of metal. She looked like she belonged here. I'm scared for him. I'm scared for us.
The mention of a key changed everything. Victor's face went from concerned to murderous. He didn't shrug it off. He hit the intercom on his desk, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. "William, my study, now." The head of security entered, and the moment later, Victor didn't give him a chance to speak. He stepped into the man's space, his eyes boring into him. "Kate saw someone," Victor hissed. "Someone who knows the blind spots. Someone with a key." "Sir, the sensors—" "I know about your charity, William," Victor interrupted. "I know you've always given Helen access to this estate, even after I gave the order to lock her out.
You thought I was too distracted to notice you letting a dismissed maid treat my home like a park? You've put my son's life at risk for a misplaced favor. What are you up to this time?" William paled, the realization hitting him that his career was over. The fear in Victor's voice was infectious. "Sir, I didn't think she meant any harm." "If I see her shadow again," Victor stated, each word a hammer blow, "I will not only fire you, I will ruin you. I'll also be involving the police. She is a trespasser. Am I clear?"
Kate watched from the floor, her chin resting on Zane's head. She watched William stumble out of the room to make the call that would end Helen's access forever. With one calculated fright, she had forced Victor to burn the only bridge Helen had left. The house fell into a heavy, secure silence. Victor looked at Kate, seeing her still trembling. He needed to fix the damage he thought the world had done to her.
"Kate," Victor said softly, reaching for her hand. "You're still shaking. This house, it feels like a cage today. I'm sorry. Let's go somewhere quiet and calming."
Kate looked up at him, her eyes wide. "Where?"
"You'll see," Victor replied.
He drove them to the small, secluded chalet on the grounds of the North London church where they had first met. It was quiet, shielded by high hedges and stone walls.
"This is where I first saw you," Victor said,
as they stood by the stone fountain in the chalet garden.
"I come here when the world gets too loud. It's always been a safe place for me."
Victor turned to Kate. He felt a profound sense of guilt. He had let the woman he loved feel unsafe. He took her shaking hands in his.
"I can't let this happen again, Kate," he said, his voice raw with emotion. "I realize just now that I'm not just protecting a guest. I'm protecting my life. I want you to be a Blackwood. I want this house and my name."
He looked into her
yours.
eyes, the desperation of a man who had finally found something he couldn't lose.
"Will you marry me, Kate? By Christmas?"
Kate looked back at him, the weight of the wind settling over her. She had won the house. She had won the man. And she had destroyed the only person who knew the truth.
Yes, I will.
She whispered.
Yes.
The Christmas wedding was not the grand, televised affair the London tabloids had predicted. Victor, true to his nature, had shuttered the gates of the Blackwood Estate to everyone but a handful of witnesses. The house was a cathedral of winter white, ivory roses, frosted pine, and a silence so thick it felt like the world had stopped spinning at the edge of the property line. Kate stood before the full-length mirror in the east wing, draped in a gown of heavy, structured silk. She looked regal, untouchable, and entirely unrecognizable from the girl who had walked off the train from the Highlands. There was no burner phone in her silk clutch. There were no more secret meetings in Regent's Park. She had deleted the last of Helen's frantic, blocked messages an hour ago. Today, the sharing formula was supposed to reach its conclusion. But as Kate adjusted her veil, she realized the formula had changed. She wasn't just a partner in a heist anymore. She was the mistress of the fortress. The ceremony took place in the Grand Library, the room where Victor had first handed her the keys to his world. Victor stood by the fireplace. The Ice King finally thawed. And then his phone buzzed. The tension wasn't in the silence, however. Just as Kate was starting toward the ceremony, her kid sister, Emily, who was the maid of honor, brought her phone. She looked terrified. Kate opened the message, and the world she had built began to crumble. It was a photograph, an old, grainy image of Kate and Helen, laughing together, clearly close. The caption beneath it was simple and damning. "The one you think you know is not who you think she is." As Kate composed herself, walking toward the waiting guests, Victor met her gaze. The warmth was gone, replaced by a chilling, hollow stare. He held his phone out, the photograph stark against the backdrop of their wedding. "It's over," Victor said, his voice devoid of emotion. "You're a liar. a cheat. The silence in the library was deafening. The few witnesses stood frozen as the Ice King didn't just return, he turned to permafrost. Before Kate could utter a single word of defense, Victor turned and ran, leaving the altar and the woman in white behind. He didn't just walk away. He retreated back to the fortress he had once tried to tear down. By the time Kate managed to gather her heavy skirts and reach the main entrance of the estate, the transition was complete. The sanctuary had become a prison again. The massive oak doors were bolted. Kate pounded on the wood, her knuckles bruising against the grain.
Victor, let me explain!
She screamed, her voice echoing off the stone walls of the courtyard. Above her, a window on the balcony creaked open. There was no face in the window, only a sudden, violent movement. Her designer suitcases, the ones filled with the silk and cashmere Victor had bought her, came hurtling over the railing. They hit the snow-covered gravel with a sickening thud, bursting open and spilling her new life into the dirt. "Get out!" Victor's voice roared from somewhere deep inside the house, stripped of all the tenderness of the last few months. "I'll have the police remove you if you're still on my land in 5 minutes." Kate stood in the falling snow, a bride with no groom, surrounded by the wreckage of a heist that had failed at the very last second. Helen had kept her promise. If she didn't get the crown, she would burn the kingdom down. The heavy oak doors felt like a tombstone, but the silence didn't last. From high above, a muffled, frantic sound broke through the stone walls. It was the rhythmic thud of small fists beating against the glass of the balcony doors.
"Daddy, no! Stop it! You're hurting her!"
Zane's voice, usually so bright and full of mischief, was raw with a terror Kate had never heard before. She looked up, her vision blurred by tears, to see the boy pressed against the window of the nursery. His small face was pale against the glass, his eyes wide as he watched his world fall apart in the snow below.
"Kate, don't go!"
Zane screamed, his voice cracking.
"Daddy, let her back in! It's Christmas! You promised!"
Inside the house, Victor stood in the shadows of the hallway, his back to the door, his chest heaving. Every scream from his son was a serrated blade across his skin. He looked at the phone in his hand, at the image of Kate and Helen, and felt the poison of every past betrayal rising in his throat. He wanted to be the man Zane thought he was, but the Ice King didn't know how to forgive a shadow. Kate didn't try to run to the car. She ignored the cold and the ruined silk, stepping back into the centre of the courtyard so Zane could see her. She blew a kiss toward the window, her hand trembling.
"I love you, Zane!"
she called out, her voice straining to reach him.
"It's okay. Everything is going to be okay."
But it wasn't. Victor finally moved. He walked to the window, his shadow looming over the boy.
He didn't look down at Kate. He placed a hand on Zane's shoulder to pull him away from the sight of the woman he had grown to love as a mother. The last thing Kate saw before the heavy velvet curtains were jerked shut was Zane's hand reaching out, grasping at the air, calling her name one last time. Kate stood alone as the security lights hummed, casting long, lonely shadows across the gravel. She reached into the mess of her open suitcase and pulled out a small gift-wrapped box that had fallen into the slush. It was the hand-painted wooden plane she had bought for Zane, the one she was supposed to give him under the tree tomorrow morning. I have to find a way to give this to him. As she found her way to the security boost, just to get some warmth.